Hello, all. Welcome back to the weekly portion review. And this week we are in the portion of Chukat, which is talking about the decrees. And really, one of the greatest mysteries in the Torah appears in the beginning of this portion, where the Torah introduces the commandment of the paraduma, the red heifer, and whose ashes are used to purify someone who became impure through contact with death, right? There's different ways of to become impure. There's the becoming impure specifically with death, which requires the red heifer. But in one of the strangest, really, paradoxes in the Torah, for these same ashes that purify the impure also end up defiling the pure as well. Now, how can a reality bring impurity and purification at the same time? And that's really not just a Jewish halacha, Jewish law question. It's really a question about life itself. Now, this portion is really about transition. It's about standing between one stage and another, between death and life. And we see over here loss and renewal, and the wilderness, really the desert, and the land of Israel. Right in this portion, the sister of Miriam and Aaron dies. Miriam dies, and then starts the crisis of the water. And Moses ends up striking the rock, and then him and Aaron are told that they're not going to be brought into the land. Aaron, of course, dies as well. So really, we see over here this portion is filled with loss, with endings, and with like the closing of a certain era, right? The end of an era, as people like to say. And yet, at the same time, uh, this is also the portion in which people are moving closer to entering the land of Israel as well. So this is a generation is ending and a new national life is about to begin. And this is exactly why the commandment of the red heifer belongs actually here. Because when you touch on the real deep roots of life and death, you discover that reality is not really that simple. And it's deeply paradoxical, as we all know this from our own experience. And if you try to really fully understand the beginning of life, you often find yourself near the edge of death. And if you really try to understand the end of life, sometimes you really find yourself at the beginning of something new. And you could even see this in childbirth, right? When a child is born, it's a moment of life and happiness and renewal. And yet, from a Jewish perspective of Jewish law, the mother becomes ritually impure. And the reason for this is because until that moment, the life was within her, and now it has left her body and entered the world. And in other words, even birth itself contains an element of loss, of separation, of transition. Really, life emerges through a process that carries this heavy shadow of death, so to speak, and it becomes a doorway to life. And this is the secret of the red heifer. The ashes come from burning, from reduction, ultimately, from what seems to symbolize finality of life, and yet from these ashes comes a purification. And again, the Torah is teaching us that ashes are not always the end. Something they're really pointing to a new beginning. And sometimes what looks like destruction is actually transformed into this instrument of renewal. And it's really not hard to think about Jewish history in light of what we just said, right? There are moments of our national story when we too were brought down to ashes, literally, right? The horrors of the exile reached, I would say, their more terrifying crescendo, so to speak, in the Holocaust when people were really burnt to the ground, and our people, as the Jewish people, were nearly destroyed. But from those ashes, right, the people of Israel rose again. And out of this destruction came a rebirth, right? And out of this devastation, we had the rebuilding of the Jewish life in the land of Israel. And this doesn't erase the tragedy, of course, and it doesn't really explain the suffering, but it does reveal a pattern that lies deep in the Torah itself, that sometimes death itself becomes the womb of life. And there was actually a beautiful image during the time of, or an idea really that was brought down during the time of King Solomon, that there was two gates. There was one gate which the bride and the groom would pass through, and there was another gate which the mourners would pass through as well when they're making their way to the graveyard. And these gates were arranged so the bride and groom would actually meet the mourners and confront them on their way out. And this was like a to give them this profound picture of life, right? The city itself was built in a way that forced people to see life in its fullness, right? Joy couldn't actually be cut off fully from sorrow, and be separated from like human pain. And that is really the vision of the Torah, that life is not just a naive celebration, and and life at the end isn't just mourning, but it's this deep life is deep enough really to hold both of these in tension. And this is really the message of this portion, right? That the section of the red heifer comes right after the end of the wilderness, as the children of Israel actually prepare to enter the land, because a new life for a nation doesn't come, cheaply. It comes after loss, after purification, after learning properly how to carry death without ultimately surrendering to it. Now, this message feels painfully relevant to us after October 7th. Since that day, the people of Israel has been living again through the space of heartbreak and renewal. We have seen terrible loss. We've cried and we've been praying and we've been mourning, and we've been carrying this impossible pain. And yet, at the same period, we've also witnessed what we've spoken about often is courage and sacrifice and tremendous unity and faith and love as well between Jews and each other. And we have seen soldiers fight and families endure this tremendous amount of pain with amazing dignity. And again, many communities responding with tremendous passion and strength. And this doesn't take the grief away, and it shouldn't, right? The Torah doesn't ask us to pretend that death is not real, right? We have the laws of 7 days of mourning, but it does teach us something else, right? That ashes, like we said, are not the end of the story. And even though we don't understand this mystery, even when suffering doesn't have a simple explanation, we have to hold true to the faith that Hashem can bring life from ashes. There's different sages that also use Israel as an example. Well, use the phoenix as the symbol of Israel as well. And what we hope for is that Hashem will hopefully comfort all those who are mourning and protect our soldiers and heal the wounded, and really allow for there to be a proper peace and a proper rebuilding. And I hope we merit to see, the day where these ashes are truly transformed into chaim, into life, into healing, and into redemption. As we say, Am Yisrael Chai. Shabbat Shalom.